Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Joe St. George. He's the national political correspondent for Scripps Television, which News Channel 5 is a part of. Joe, the president briefly says that these bills that he's trying to pass in Washington, the infrastructure bill already passed, and the Build Back Better bill also still pending, will make generational changes in the nation. And it'll be once in a generation kind of things and transformational for the country. But I think you alluded to this earlier, it may take a generation for some of these things to be seen, so he needs pretty much quick successes because he's got midterms coming up next year, and if things don't turn around, he may have some problems in those midterms if this particular bill that's been passed and the one that's still pending in Congress doesn't get into law.
Yeah, Pat, you can talk about all these projects all you want, but until somebody in rural Tennessee or rural America actually gets access to high-speed internet for the first time, there's not really going to be that much of a change in opinion until that commute to work in downtown Nashville gets a little bit better. People aren't going to really feel it. So, yeah, the president can talk a lot about what's in this bill, and there is a lot, right? $550 billion in new funding, that's significant. It will do a lot for roads and bridges and trains, but Amtrak changes aren't happening overnight. Roads and bridges take years to be constructed in some cases. It's going to be tough for the average person, I think, to feel the impact. That being said, Team Biden's going to try to speed up the process as best they can. We'll see how successful they are in the coming months.
The federal government doesn't have a great record in recent years in quickly rolling out new programs successfully, whether you're talking about Obamacare, the COVID vaccines, the stimulus money, or the extra unemployment checks. Is there anything President Biden can do to speed up that process to make sure things work quickly?
Well, I think Pat, his experience, when you talk to White House officials, they say his experience is going to be a bit of a game changer here with that. I mean, you're right. Government moves slow oftentimes. But remember, when President Biden was vice president, he oversaw the stimulus funds being handed out in 2009 to offset the Great Recession of 2008, the big spending bill, the stimulus bill of the Obama administration. So there's some experience there, and all indications is that the White House will be appointing someone, a czar, if you will, to oversee this, to make sure there's no corruption, no fraud. That's another big concern for this White House. There may be some fraud or corruption.
But isn't one of the reasons Joe Biden has gotten in trouble as president is that people elected him because they thought his experience in government would make government work better, but all they see in Capitol is the Democrats fighting among themselves and nothing getting done? How can he make things different this time? And if he does make things different, could it turn his poll numbers around?
Yeah, we may be in a time, Pat, where polling is polling, and it's been pretty consistent. I mean, he took a big dip following Afghanistan, right? He was hovering around 50% or so in the polls up until midsummer, late summer. Now he's pretty consistently in the low 40s. Former President Trump was consistently in the low 40s as well throughout much of his presidency. So we may be in this time where 40% of the country likes who's in office. The other country, the other 50% doesn't, and that 10% in the middle goes back and forth in the next election, depending on who's running. So we shall see. We'll see if he has enough time to turn it around.
On the Build Back Better bill that's pending up in both the House and the Senate, we're waiting now for the Congressional Budget Office to come up with some numbers to actually show that it costs what the administration and supporters say it will cost. If those numbers come out sideways, President Biden's going to have some real problems.
Well, he already has some real problems with this piece of legislation. Infrastructure, Pat, was always easier to get done than this separate partisan social spending bill. It always was. We talked about at the top of the show. Republicans voted for infrastructure. Not a single Republican's going to vote for this social spending plan. So in order to get this through, you have to navigate the caucus in the House, which is becoming increasingly difficult for Democrats, the progressive versus moderate divide. Those moderates are the ones watching for that CBO score from the Congressional Budget Office. And they're the ones who want to make sure that this thing is actually paid for the way that the president and the White House is saying it. The progressives are less concerned about the price tag with the CBO score. But this comes down to Senator Joe Manchin and probably Senator Sinema out in Arizona, and whether or not they support this. Senator Manchin has been very critical of a lot of these programs that's been proposed. And he's also concerned about inflation. And he's expressed how he thinks government spending trillions of dollars perhaps contributed a bit to how the cost of things have gone up in Tennessee and around the country.
There's reports that Senator Manchin now wants to put off consideration of the Build Back Better bill sometime into 2022. How long a window do the Democrats have to get things done? Aren't they? They're already pushing their luck. I mean, if something happened to one of the senators in a Democratic state with a Republican governor, the Democrats could lose their majority overnight.
Yeah, I mean, you're one vote away from having Senator Mitch McConnell lead the Republican, leading the United States Senate again. So you're absolutely right. There isn't on paper, right? They have until the end of next year to get things done. There's not going to be no change in Congress on paper until 2023 after the 2022 midterm election. But you're right. The window seems to be narrowing for President Biden to get this part of the agenda done. He would have wanted this done weeks ago. I think we're still weeks away. If they can get this thing done by New Year's Day, I think that would be deemed a success story by most Democrats in Washington and around the country.
Joe St. George is our guest. He's the national political correspondent for Scripps Television, which News Channel 5 is part of. Back to continue our conversation with Joe on the other side of this break.